Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in Gasho. Think not lightly of good, saying, "It will not come to me." Drop by drop is the water pot filled, and just so, the wise, gathering it little by little, fill themselves with good. Namo Amidabutsu, Namo Amidabutsu, Namo Amidabutsu, Namon Dops, Namon Dops, Namon Dops. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. It is, of course, the last day of January. And, I hope your January went well. I know it was definitely a very stressful month for a lot of people. I hope that the new year is also going well for you. We've had a ton of rain recently, which, if nothing else, is a nice change of pace, considering that the mood around here, I think deserves a little bit of a pick-me-up, needs a little bit of a pick-me-up in a lot of different ways. And, breaks like this weather, I think, are actually kind of nice to switch up the pace of things a bit. So 2 more days from now, we're actually going to be having another holiday, and it is, of course, the time-old tradition of Groundhog's Day. So we will get absolute definitive confirmation as to whether it will be an early spring or, 6 more weeks of winter. Impartial estimates about Groundhog's Day actually suggest that the groundhog is only accurate about, I think, 35 to 40% of the time. So less than half. So you would literally just be better just flipping a coin and trying to determine it that way as a 50-50 split. You'd be better doing that than actually predicting it the way that the groundhog does. And while Groundhog Day is maybe like a C- holiday at best in terms of its actual value, it is an A+ film. It's actually, I would say, maybe my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies for sure, but definitely, top 5. So the reason that I bring up Groundhog Day is because there's a lot of different lessons that we can take away from it, right? I'm sure you've seen it, right? Or at least you know the concept about it. You've had 30 years to watch this film, so if I spoil something for you, it's kind of on you at this point as opposed to it being on me. But the story is about Phil Connors, curmudgeonly reporter, right? Who was assigned to cover Groundhog Day in the snowbound town of Puxatawny. And he goes through the motions of his job, very half-heartedly, covering the event, and then, of course, retires for the evening. And then, that night something really strange happens. He wakes up the next day, and that he realizes that he's woken up in the day that he just lived through, that he previously finished. And he goes through the events and he does everything all over again, hoping to wake up in the next day. But this just keeps happening over and over and over again. He begins to repeat the same day, seemingly endlessly. And as this goes on, he becomes incredibly depressed. He begins to suffer. He experiences extreme consternation and forlornness. An existential crisis besets him. And, eventually, all this incredible suffering really makes him reach some extremely low points in his life. However, as he begins to repeat the days over and over, he eventually begins to change. He realizes that he has the opportunity to better himself throughout this repeated experience. And as time goes on, he begins to not only help himself, but also improve the lives of all the people around him in the entire town of Puxatawny. It's actually quite great. And eventually he gets released from this experience after he's done all these good deeds and helped all these people. So estimates, of course, about Groundhog's Day, people, on the internet that have nothing better to do have estimated that he spent about 8 years, 8 months, and 16 days in Puxatawny repeating the same day over and over and over again. Again, not sure how they came up with that number, but, it does bear in a lot of thought in terms of how much you could accomplish in 8 years and 8 months, 16 days. A ton, right? Theoretically, if you were to do it with your all. But of course, getting started would be incredibly difficult. The reason I bring it up is because there are lots of articles on the internet that kind of talk about Groundhog Day and make the point that in a lot of ways, Groundhog Day is the quintessential Buddhist text, or maybe not text, but Buddhist film. And that if you really wanted to summarize the teachings of the Buddha, a great place to go for a newcomer would be Groundhog Day. That's the place that you start. So if you think about the movie that way, good argument can be made for it, right? So think about it like this. Phil's actually living in the world of samsara. suffering, delusion, blindness, greed, anger, and stupidity, right? And he's being reborn again and again and again in this world of delusion and ignorance. And much of this, of course, is not just caused by the circumstances of his life, but the fact that he himself is curmudgeonly. He himself is very judgmental and looks down on all these people and causes himself seemingly endless amounts of pain and suffering. Well, as a result of that, he repeats things over and over and over again, much like a human being is reborn over and over and over again through many, millions of kalpas. And over the course of these lifetimes, he begins to gradually change. He begins to actually learn things. He begins to actually recognize that he can change things about himself. He begins to play the piano, right? He begins to recognize that his actions are tied to other people. They're interconnected to everyone around him. And he begins to act not just for himself after a while, but he begins to actually act in a way that benefits other people, right? And more than this, he becomes aware that every little thing that he does has an effect, a cause and effect. And eventually, if you follow the Buddha's teaching on the whole thing, becomes an enlightened being and is released from the world of samsara, is enlightened, right? So it's actually kind of a nice fit in a lot of ways. Now, to be fair, Harold Ramis, the director of this film, the late Harold Ramis, said that this was never his intention. But it feels right in a lot of ways. And it's an excellent metaphor for the teachings of the Buddha, in my humble opinion. The reason I bring this up is because lately I have been thinking about this movie a lot. And I think it is because I feel like and I'm sure many of you would agree, I feel like we are all trapped in Groundhog's Day. And if you don't feel like you're trapped in Groundhog's Day, I feel like it's probably because you haven't been following the rules, the COVID rules. I think it's most noticeable in school, but it's really everywhere in my day-to-day routine. Every day feels exactly like the day that came before it. I wake up, I roll out of bed, I brew some coffee, I tie my hair up in a nice little ponytail, and I begin talking to students for 8 hours. Students who, because we're doing distance learning, and I am talking to middle school and high school students, do not say a word back to me unless I make them do so. So this is 8 hours of this. It is like screaming into the void or screaming rhetorical questions into the void every single day for 8 hours. It is quite difficult. After that, of course, I exercise, I cook dinner for my wife, I wait for her to come home, and then we watch what seems like an endless line of Star Trek episodes, the ones that we never saw when we were younger. I go to sleep, and this process repeats. The only thing that really is absent from my experience that Bill Murray experiences is that my morning does not start off with Sonny and Cher every single day, which I'm grateful for. Now, to say this is frustrating, of course, is a bit of an understatement because, again, like I, as a teacher, really like to be in the classroom and I like to engage with people and talk to people and I like to tell jokes and dance around and do lots of engaging things. And I feel like that sort of thing has been kind of taken away from my repertoire as a teacher this year. And so I find myself very upset all the time. I find myself upset at myself because I can't do the things that I would like to do. I find myself upset at the kids sometimes because they just will not say anything and they will just sit there blankly staring at the screen with their avatars up, probably playing video games and like listening and like watching like videos on TikTok. I find myself mad at the situation as a whole, right? It's frustrating. And I'm sure whether it's school or not, you feel the same way in many ways. But I will say that as time has gone by and as I've thought about the teachings of the Buddha and the film Groundhog Day, honestly, I find myself a little less upset. And more than anything, I find myself just wishing I could do more to help people. And the hard part about COVID is that sometimes that is the hardest thing to do, is figuring out what it is you can do to help other people, to make the difference that you think maybe needs to be made. But even though I'm far away from a lot of people, I think that while I can only speak to students through a video screen or maybe my friends through a phone and my family through like a voice call or something like that, It doesn't mean I can't do my best, and it doesn't mean that little opportunities do not present themselves in the smallest possible ways if you're looking at them. It's just like in Groundhog Day. The opportunity to make a difference is there if you're looking for it. At school, I found that it's just a few nice words to kids every day, encouragement. Trying to see things through their point of view. And again, from their point of view, the situation is terrible, right? You're a kid, you want to go do things, you want to go live your life, and you can't, and that sucks. And I understand that that is terrible. I mean, it's also encouraging the students every opportunity that I get, trying to be positive when, even if it's the kid that you know never turns anything in and is definitely just like on his phone all day. But also outside of school, it's just in my day-to-day life, right? It's spending an extra time at the end of the day doing more chores, just an extra chore here or there, sending a nice text message to a friend, picking up food, cooking, doing an extra, special something to the food, like for the wife, calling my mom, anything like that. It's the little things, right? You have to look for them and the opportunities to do them, but little things. And you could do something different pretty much every day. It's been suggested that hearing the Dharma and saying the name of the Buddha is akin to planting seeds deep within ourselves. And these seeds, over time, they grow and eventually, little by little, blossom into something new. Understanding the teachings of the Buddha, experiencing the benevolence of Buddhist compassion, it isn't something that happens overnight, but it's cultivated over the course of a lifetime. And there are setbacks. It's not a linear line, right? It's slow changes, gradual progress that go back and forth, but it always starts somewhere, right? And the planting of these seeds, this is shinjin, deep within us, awakening within us. Each and every one of us, of course, has heard the teachings of the Buddha and has said the Buddha's name. I mean, we've said it reverently. We've said it over and over. We've said it in gratitude. And let's be reasonable. I might be generalizing, but you probably wouldn't be spending your Sunday morning listening to a Dharma message from me if you had not said those words before, or thought them, or cared about them in some kind of way. And that means the seeds of the Dharma have already been planted in you. And over time, it's your job to just slowly cultivate them. Slowly, bit by bit. In a period of COVID, when our daily actions are so limited and the contours of our routines so predictable, it is, in many ways, upon us to find ways to express the Dharma, to help these little seeds grow. And it's imperative that we do this, even if it's the smallest little thing. Looking for opportunities for gratitude, for reflection, for dana, and for the types of improvements to our own well-being that we might simply skip over in a different period of time when our lives are too busy. They are not too busy at this moment, and there's time to think and time to reflect. And again, sometimes it's setting up lights outside for your wife, for you. No one will see them for a while, but setting them up. Or preparing a nursery, or learning how to cook a new meal for people. Maybe it's, like I said, sending a text message or a phone call or an email that you might not do normally. Something to just remind people that you're there and willing to listen, willing to care. For me, it's seeing things from my students' point of view. It's trying to reach out to them. And again, even if they are on TikTok all day, it is still recognizing that I want to hear from them, whatever they have to say. It's important to consider that as our days and mornings repeat, sometimes painstakingly predictable fashion, there remain many opportunities to make a difference, to help others. And honestly, in each opportunity, there's an impact that can be made, and each individual opportunity is its own unique moment that presents itself every single day. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amidavits, Namo Amidavits, Namo Amidavits, Namandaps, Namandaps, Namandaps.